In this video, I'm going to react to the worst Formula One race of all time. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. This is the place where I react to music, media, sports, anime, anything related to popular culture. I'll watch it with an open mind and give you my 100% honest reaction to it. And if you could please hit that like button early, I'd really appreciate it. Now, I don't know if any of you guys watched the Italian Grand Prix yesterday, but man, oh man, what a race. First things first, I just want to congratulate Daniel Ricciardo on taking the win yesterday. I really like Daniel. He's one of the few sort of like just down to earth drivers on the grid, and yeah, he's one of my favorites. So well done him. Now we've got to talk about the big crash. I mean, just an absolutely crazy incident. Verstappen's now been he's been penalised. I think he's going to lose 3 grid places at the next Grand Prix. And I mean, I like Verstappen, you know, I like Hamilton as well, obviously him being a British driver, but I just have to say, like, Verstappen, he part of what makes him an excellent driver is that he's so aggressive. He doesn't want to give space to anyone, even though in some moments he should. I feel like the corner yesterday was an example of a time where he should have surrendered the space. He didn't do that, and thank goodness for the halo. If that halo wasn't on Hamilton's car, he honestly could have died. He said it himself, because Verstappen literally, like, look at the pictures, he's parked on top of where Hamilton's head would have been if not for the halo. It's just absolutely insane. This season is shaping up to be one of the best that I've seen, honestly. It's just, at the moment, obviously Verstappen's got the faster car, but you just can never count out, you know, the 7-time world champion. I couldn't guess who's going to take it right now. I just really hope that, you know, that drivers don't get carried away in all of this. I know you want to win a world championship. I know how amazing that would be for you, but at the same time, you don't want to put other drivers' safety in jeopardy. But yeah, what a race. Now, this should be a fascinating video. It's by the legendary Slap Shoes. He's one of my favorite YouTubers for not just NASCAR content, but content in general. He does a great job in telling stories. And this, I believe, is based on the American Grand Prix in 2005, I think. This was well before I started watching Formula One. I've got no idea what happened, but for Slap to call this the worst Grand Prix of all time, it's got to be pretty bad. So yeah, let's get straight to it. So let's go. This is going to be me reacting to the worst Formula One race of all time. Let's do it.
The day is June 19th, 2005, and Formula One racing in America, as we know it, is about to die. As the cars roll off the grid for their parade lap, an eerie tension looms over the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Rumors have circulated all week about a potential walkout by teams, after several horrific tire failures and near misses during the earlier practice sessions. But everyone is suited up and rolls off on schedule. Hopefully the issue is resolved. However, as the cars come around the final corner, to everyone's horror, car after car pulls into the pits, and only 6 line up on the grid. Surely this is some sort of mistake. They can't do this, right? An estimated crowd of over 110,000 watches in stunned silence.
Wow, 110K. Nice number.
As the lights flick off and the race begins. After the cars scream off into turn 1, the only thing that can be heard in the aluminum and steel canyon of Gasoline Alley is the chorus of boos and curses. Before even 3 laps are completed, tens of thousands of angry fans have left the track and swarm the nearest ticket booths, demanding refunds. Police and security personnel can barely contain the incensed mobs. 6 cars will start this race, only 2 will finish on the lead lap. For Michael Schumacher, this farce of a race will be his only win of the year. For his teammate Rubens Barrichello, it'll be his best finish of the year. And for Thiago Monteiro, it'll be the only podium of his entire career.
Why did only 6 cars take place in the race? I'm sure he's going to tell me, but I mean, why? maybe tires. Maybe the surface wasn't good for the tires or something.
The 2005 US Grand Prix was a complete unmitigated disaster, as it spelled the end for Formula One racing in America for years afterwards. But how did it all come to this? What had to happen to give us the worst F1 race ever?
Jeez. Ooh.
The US Grand Prix has always had a tumultuous past. For one, no one could agree on where it should be held. Most Grand Prix events represent their respective nations at historic and important venues that showcase the country's wealth and national identity. The British Grand Prix has Silverstone, a track built upon a repurposed air base that defended the country from the Blitz during World War II. For Germany, there's the Nürburgring and the Hockenheimring, tucked away in the Teutonic forests of western Germany. Canada has the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, located on a man-made island created for the Olympics in 1976. The United States, on the other hand, has held Grand Prix events at Sebring, Riverside, Las Vegas, Long Beach, Detroit, Dallas, Phoenix, Watkins Glen, and Indianapolis up to this point. Am I missing any? And a lot of the time, these events weren't even called the US Grand Prix. In 1982, the States played host to 3 events on the schedule, the most races ever held by any country in a single season. And not one of those tracks remains on the schedule today. Hell, none of them even made it out of the decade.
I do think, though, that now that Formula One is owned by Liberty Media, I think that's a US company, they're doing a tremendous job in just growing the fan base, especially in attracting younger fans. So, yeah, I think Formula One in the US, it's obviously a lot more popular now than it was when this race took place, but it's just going to just increase in popularity in the States, I think.
No matter what Formula One tried, nothing seemed to stick. For a sanctioning body that holds races in some of the most scenic places on Earth, like Budapest, Bahrain, and Monaco, a mainstay event in America is the last feather to put in the cap of the FIA, the sanctioning body for Formula One racing. A crown jewel event in America is the last box to check off.
The last infinity stone.
The country has a rich history of racing and a strong car culture. It should be a match made in heaven, but Americans are a staunchly nationalistic bunch and seem to prefer their homegrown racing promotions as opposed to the Eurocentric Formula One. For Bernie Ecclestone, the CEO of the parent company of Formula One, it has been his dream since he took the job back in the 70s to have a race in the streets of Manhattan, or at least have it as a scenic backdrop.
Now that would be awesome. But I fear that it would be too much like Monaco in the sense that the lanes would be too narrow, so overtaking would be too hard, making for a boring race.
He'll stop at nothing to get it, but in 2000 the second best thing comes across his desk. A race at America's most historic and iconic racetrack, the big house itself, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Tony George, owner of IMS at the time, completes revisions to the track so it now has an infield road course. The layout uses the front stretch but has the cars running down the straight clockwise and then has them go into the infield after what is normally IndyCar pit entrance. The track is fast with long straights and sweeping corners all over the place. But the biggest point of interest? Turn 13 or IndyCar Turn 1. A long sweeping corner with 9.2 degrees of banking. There's no track in F1 that has a corner anything close to it. It's a big hit with fans who buy tickets near the turn in droves. And the best part for the FIA? The Indianapolis Motor Speedway has already footed the bill for the renovations. And massive seating capacity is already there for a part of the country that is as car crazy as they come.
Wow, so pretty much everything looks like it's in place. Like, this shouldn't have failed. Well, let's see.
Plus, one of F1's biggest factory teams, Honda, has a major manufacturing plant just an hour down the road. Hype is massive for the first race in 2000, and it goes off without a hitch. Same as the case for 2001 and all of the other ensuing years. So unlike NASCAR's worst race ever, this tire scandal and walkout was not caused by a new track. Indy was a known quantity by the time 2005 rolled around. So what gives? To be honest, it was a variety of factors that include the politics of the FIA, track resurfacing, dumb new seasonal rules for F1, a stupidly rigid command structure, and our old friend the good old-fashioned tire war. Let's start off with the tipping point for this whole cascade of events, the track surface. By the time 2004 wrapped up, the track surface at Indy was getting pretty old, and it was time for a repave. The winters in Indiana are pretty brutal, and as such, pavement needs to be properly maintained to deal with the freezing conditions and wild temperature swings going into the summer. The track was repaved during the off-season, and to ensure that the high-speed track remained as safe and stable as possible, IMS opted to use diamond grinders to make the track surface as smooth as glass. This eliminates any bumps that might naturally form on the racing surface, which is a nice thing to go without when you're in an Indy car going in excess of 220 miles an hour. Diamond grinding can also make the track grippier, and helps with water drainage in the event of rain. The downside is, though, that diamond grinding turns the track surface into a billion sharp little teeth.
Yeah, I was just thinking tires, especially the soft tires that, manufacturers love in Formula One. Those are going to get shredded.
That can cause a lot of wear on your tires very quickly. This isn't a problem, though, if you use a harder rubber compound to deal with it, and the Indy 500, held just 1 month before the US Grand Prix, saw no serious issues. So the repave might have been negligible had it not been for the other deciding factor going into race week: F1's ongoing tire war between Bridgestone and Michelin. Yeah, I know I've talked a lot about tire wars on this channel in the past and why they're stupid and bad, but this just goes to show how bad they are when they keep creeping up into conversations about the worst races ever. Bridgestone and Michelin's war have been pretty quiet up to the US Grand Prix. Only a few minor flare-ups in the late 90s and early 2000s are of note. And even then, the worst that would happen is one manufacturer's teams just running away with an easy W. But in a sport that prides itself on car manufacturers like Ferrari, Renault, Toyota, and Honda duking it out on the world's biggest stage, it was a bit disheartening for fans that things usually boiled down to tires being the deciding factor.
Yeah.
In 2005, Bridgestone had just...
It's crazy to consider the fact that Kimi Räikkönen, he's been around for so long. He raced Michael Schumacher. And now, he's racing Schumacher's kid. It's crazy, honestly.
3 teams left on their roster: Ferrari, Minardi, and Jordan. Everyone else sided with Michelin. However, on opening practice on Friday, Toyota driver Ralf Schumacher had a terrible accident in turn 13, the high-banked high-speed corner. He had had a similar accident the year prior in the same spot, which resulted in a broken back. Although he isn't injured nearly as badly as he was in 2004, he won't compete on Sunday, and Toyota calls up their test driver Ricardo Zonta to replace him. However, Zonta ends up with the same issue, although he manages to not total his car. The other drivers are also experiencing tire failures of varying degrees, or at best severe blistering, and always on the left side tires. The culprit is clearly the diamond ground asphalt in turn 13. The high-speed loads put on the left side of the car are just too much for the tires to handle, or I should say too much for the Michelin tires to handle. Bridgestone's teams seem to be just fine, although they are all considerably slower than their Michelin counterparts. As it turned out, Bridgestone had opted for a slower but harder tire that could withstand the higher speeds in the banked turn. Now, why did they do this? Was it just luck or some incredible act of fortuitous foresight? Well, no, they just had the inside scoop. Bridgestone owns Firestone, its American counterpart, and they are the sole tire supplier for IndyCar. As soon as the repave was completed, IndyCar held multiple testing sessions to make sure everything was good. They had made note of the additional wear due to the diamond grinding and made adjustments for the 500 in May. Not only that, but IndyCar's build-up for the 500 goes on for an entire month. They literally call it the month of May. Bridgestone had thousands of hours of testing data to pour over when they made their F1 tires for the US Grand Prix. Michelin had no such data and went into Indy completely blind. But perhaps they should have heeded the cautionary tale of the Coca-Cola 600 held by NASCAR just 1 month earlier. Charlotte Motor Speedway had also just been repaved, and it too opted to go with diamond grinding to smooth out the track. Track president Humpy Wheeler had touted the process as levigation, and said it would essentially be like artificially aging the track, so multiple grooves of racing would develop and improve the racing overall. However, Goodyear, NASCAR's tire supplier, missed the mark, and after a record-setting 22 cautions and over 100 laps of the 400-lap race were run under yellow, NASCAR learned its lesson and never used levigation at any track ever again. But Michelin either chose to dismiss these findings,
22 cautions, goodness me,
or just didn't care. And now they're out in Midwestern America, thousands of miles from their home base, with tires that are not up to spec. They fly in harder compounds as soon as they can, but they don't work out any better. After Saturday's activities, they're at an impasse. It's logistically impossible to fly in any more tires, and compounding the problem is a new rule that Formula One introduced just this year. Teams cannot make tire changes. You must run one set of tires for the whole race. Why was this rule implemented? Well, Michael Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello, and the Ferrari crew had dominated F1 in the early 2000s by getting creative with their pit strategy. Using softer compounds and smaller fuel cells, they would make more pit stops during the race than most other teams, but they would make up that time out on the track with insane speed. Thus, F1 introduces the single set rule, and it seems to have worked thus far. Ferrari are winless going into Indy. The rule did have its downsides, though. It had cost Kimi Räikkönen the win at the European Grand Prix in round 7 of the season because he had flat-spotted the tire earlier in the race and wasn't allowed to change it, and it blew on the last lap. All things considered, it was a pretty dumb rule, and they ended up axing it as soon as the 2005 season was over.
Absolutely.
But right here in June of 2005 at the US Grand Prix, the rule is still law, and the FIA are digging their heels in over this one. There are rumblings all weekend throughout the paddock and the campgrounds about a potential postponement or even a team walkout. But this isn't an era before social media, so things remain relatively quiet. And any plans made by the FIA, the teams, or the tire manufacturers are held under wraps until the last second. The eventual walkout that you see here didn't have to happen, and it wasn't because of lack of trying on the part of the teams or Michelin to come up with a solution. The FIA wanted Michelin teams to just go slower through the final turn, but the teams correctly pointed out that having cars go 20 or 30 miles an hour slower in a high-banked, flat-out corner with other cars going full throttle was just begging for a disaster.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got, half the grid going, let's say, 150 miles an hour, and, the other half is going, say, 120, I mean, unless all the drivers in the quicker cars have constantly got eyes on everybody else, you're just asking for a potential collision. It's just, it's not realistic.
Michelin teams asked that the no tire change rule be lifted for them. Since they would have to pit regularly, the Bridgestone cars would be at an advantage, but the FIA didn't bite on that either. Michelin teams even asked to not be awarded points at the race towards the championship, just so long as they could still put on a halfway respectable show for the fans. The FIA still said no. All the way up until 11 a.m., just hours before the start of the race, talks were still underway. Michelin thought they had a compromise cooked up. Place a chicane at the entrance of turn 13 and let the Bridgestone teams just drive around it if they wanted to. The FIA still would not budge, saying that any alterations made to the track would violate their rules regarding inspections for track safety. And if Michelin teams went through with this, then the FIA would back out of the event entirely, meaning that the race would be unsanctioned and no FIA officials or personnel would be at the track. To which, surprisingly, Bridgestone and Michelin teams called the FIA's bluff, saying that they would put in their own personnel to direct and officiate the race. Then the FIA realized that if teams did that, then they'd probably get it in their heads that they could just make their own sanctioning body.
Yeah. It would set a precedent which the FIA would immediately regret.
And the FIA would be rendered immediately obsolete. F1 racing would essentially be dead, in a sort of repeat of the kart-IndyCar split from 1996. Well, they couldn't have that, and they just shut the whole thing down. Michelin teams can't race because the manufacturer didn't bring proper tires, and that's that. Too bad. Over 110,000 people showed up on that hot June afternoon just to watch their favorite drivers do a parade lap and park it because the FIA had to flex their muscle and stick it to Michelin. The 6 Bridgestone cars line up in their correct slots and take off, only to have one of the Jordans in the back immediately blow up and start billowing smoke. The only question now is who will get that last podium slot as the Ferraris quickly pull away. Portuguese driver Tiago Monteiro ends up with the honor for Jordan, finishing 1 lap down. Ferrari drivers Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello finished 1-2. And at the awards ceremony, nobody except Ferrari personnel and an FIA skeleton crew were present. They quickly took their trophies and left. The only person who looked even remotely happy to be there was Tiago, who reportedly stayed at the awards ceremony for hours just partying with his team. The stands are pretty much empty.
Yeah, Tiago. He sounds like a fun dude.
Well before the race wrapped up. And during the first few laps, some fans had even thrown beer cans and water bottles onto the track. Angry mobs swarmed the ticket office on the way out and demanded refunds that they would never get. At least not from the FIA or IMS anyway. Michelin actually stepped up and offered compensation for anybody who wanted a refund and issued out checks through the Indianapolis Motor Speedway's ticket office.
That's
They
awesome.
also bought 20,000 tickets for the 2006 US Grand Prix and gave them away to spectators from the 2005 race.
Well done, Michelin, for stepping up there. I'm impressed by that because they didn't have to.
Champ Car, which was holding the Grand Prix of Cleveland just the very next week in the neighboring state of Ohio, offered free admission for anyone holding a ticket stub from the F1 race.
Okay.
The 2006 US Grand Prix was held at the same track in front of a still sizable crowd, but the damage had been done. The 2007 event saw even less fan interest, and IMS did not renew its contract with Formula One racing after that. It would take 5 years and a completely new venue in the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, to win back American hearts and minds to Formula One. That and a ticket to COTA comes with a free concert by some A-list celebrity talent. How much of that race is propped up by Hollywood A-listers, I'll let you decide. Michelin also did not renew its contract with F1 in 2007, and handed the reins fully over to Bridgestone. There has not been a tire war since. Although in 2020, Pirelli got into a bidding war with Hankook tires that threatened to spiral out of control into a new war. But cooler heads prevailed and Pirelli's contract runs through 2023. We'll see what happens after that. So there it was, the worst F1 race. A tire scandal brought about by insider information, stupid rules, an unnecessarily rigid command structure in F1, business bigwigs digging their heels in, and one of the biggest races of the year in terms of attendance and prestige was over before it had even started, and would disappear from the schedule just 2 years later. As the great Dave Despain once said, tire wars are a lot like most other wars. Nobody won, and everybody lost. Anyway, I'm Slapshoes, thanks for watching, and until next time, y'all take it easy.
Awesome story. Now that was an interesting story. I mean, just the FIA, honestly, like any kind of organization that's, but had pretty much uncurtailed power for such a long time, they're just bound to get kind of drunk on that power. And it's just clear that the FIA in this example really were just a tiny compromise, in letting the that little side lane would have potentially rescued the race, and we wouldn't have had to wait 5 to 10 years for Formula One to kind of re-enter and do well in the US. They lost out on so much potential revenue. Think of 110,000 fans paying to watch Formula One, buying tickets. All of the money that would have gone into the local economy at around those dates. Yeah, just really stubborn. And tire wars. I didn't really know, like prior to this video and the tire war in NASCAR, the one that I reacted to about a week ago, I didn't really know how important they were, in terms of their impact on racing. Just really interesting stuff. Well done to Slapshoes on this video. He did an amazing job. As always, this was a lot of fun to watch. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, and keep throwing the recommendations my way. I know I say it all the time, but they genuinely help me out, because if I know you enjoyed watching something, I'll definitely enjoy reacting to it. So like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, keep throwing the recommendations, and I'll catch you in the next one.